Glad everybody could join us today. This is an exciting day. It's particularly exciting because we've been working on this document for a very long time. It's also very exciting because if you're a nerd like we are into this stuff, and it's very cool stuff. So I wanted to tell you all that today we are going to be doing an overview of the Immersive Audio Design Recommended Practice, which is the CEDIA CTA RP22. And if we could bring up the presentation, that would be wonderful. And when I say overview, we'll be talking in generalities. We're not going to be going through this document page by page, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But it's not just me here. So let's talk about who's here. So I'm Walt Zerbe, Senior Director of Technology and Standards at CEDIA. Do a whole bunch of other things as well as the podcast. But with me are two very important volunteers who have been quite involved with the creation of this and other things. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Peter Aylett. Peter, how are you?
Hi, Walt. I'm really, really good.
Good. Thanks for joining. Besides being involved, I don't like to read everything on the slide, but I do want to read this stuff. Peter is the chair of R10. I'm going to be talking about what R10 is, so don't worry about that. And he's also the chair of this particular work effort, the Immersive Audio Design Recommended Practice, which has a working, actually a number title of RP22. We also have Mr. Ben Goff. Ben, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Walt. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Ben. Ben has been a regular participant on the creation of this. He's a major contributor to the document. And Peter and Ben have also been teaching on this. So again, today we're kind of going through this, but there's lots of ways you can learn about this particular work effort. If you attend the CEDIA Expo or the Integrated Systems Europe show, we do sessions and workshops to talk about how to apply some of these concepts. So here's Walt with the big letdown. Sorry, we're not going to show you the document today. And this is a high-level overview. It's a discussion. And one of the reasons why we're not going to show you the document is that's what the review process is for. We don't want people to critique any particular line item in the document. That's not the purpose of today. The purpose of today is to say, here is this document. What is it? What isn't it? And we're going to go through the high level so that you can be prepared, if you are so inclined, to participate in the review process. And then we'll talk about the review process at the end. So first things first, I said I would talk about who R10 is. Many of you might know that. Many of you might not know that. So CEDIA is a standards development organization, and so is a Consumer Technology Association. We have a joint group together, and the group is called R10. Yes, weird name that stems from back at the CTA days. When they first got into standards, they gave their groups a letter and number designation. So ours happened to become R10. When the group was first started, the CTA administered the group. Now CEDIA administers the group. And this group, our sole focus is to develop recommended practices and standards for the installation of technology, which is what we do. We are CEDIA people, we're designers, we're integrators, we're a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's what we do. And then we're made up of a whole bunch of different disciplines, integrators, manufacturers, distributors. You can read those all down there below. But we have a diverse group of people that come together to create these things. So let's talk about this document. Why did we create it? Peter, would you please lead us off in why we did the Immersive Audio Design Recommended Practice?
Absolutely. A small history lesson before we start. There was a document that was created by a bunch of exceptionally bright people back in 2009, and it was imaginatively called CEB 22. That's where this 22 came from. Back in that day, it was run by the CTA, and the CEB stood for Consumer Electronics Bulletin. Now CEDIA run this process. We've changed that to RP, which is recommended practice. And 22, it's just 22. I wouldn't hold much of a candle to what that means. So between 2009 and now, obviously a lot has happened. And while sound is still sound and speakers are still speakers and physics is still physics, the big thing that's come along is immersive audio. And when I say immersive audio, we're talking about things like Atmos, DTS:X, DTS:X Pro, Auro 3D, MPEG-H. That's really changed the game for how we sell, how we design, and how we specify systems. So we felt that an update was well needed, because 14 years since the last one is just too long. And a quick note on that, there is no way we're going to leave it 14 years until the next one. Now we've got this recommended practice pretty much finished. We're aiming to keep working on it as almost as a continual effort, and probably bring up a significant update every 18 months to 2 years. So watch this space, and I'm going to say this a lot on this webinar. Please, 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 if you like what you hear, when you review it, if you think this is really, really cool, how can I get involved? Please get in contact with Walt, and we would love to have you involved in future work efforts. First thing to say about the document is this is a recommended practice. It's not a standard. Standard uses words like shall. A recommended practice uses words like should. So when we say it's a recommended practice, it's not us as a group, it's not CEDIA as CEDIA saying you shall do this. It's a recommended practice that says here is a bunch of really, really, really top of their game industry people that have got together and developed a consensus-based document. And when I say consensus, as chair of the group, my job is, yes, of course I have an opinion, but my job really is to bring the consensus of the group together. And quite often the group is split on a decision, and then we just need to take a vote so we can move forward. And currently, without a recommended practice, without this kind of document, if I go to a system, or if I look at photos of a system and I say, I don't think that's very good, or I don't think that's right, the answer will probably be, oh, but Peter, that's your opinion. And you know what? They'd be right. Without recommended practices, without standards, it is an opinion. Once this is published, we'll all be able to look at system designs and go, well, no, actually, that goes against the recommended practice. So that's a big, big step forward. The next thing to talk about is it's not a teaching document. This isn't a course. This isn't the totality of absolutely everything you need to know to design an entertainment space. It is a recommended practice, so it tells you what you should be ending up with and a little bit about how to get there. It's certainly not the full story. For the full story, CEDIA will be developing a lot of resources. We'll be teaching some workshops, and in the document there's a long list of both normative references, and a normative reference is we have taken something straight out of an existing recommended practice or standard. And then there are informative references, which is kind of our book list. We're saying, hey, here's some really, really good stuff for you to read around the topic. The second thing to mention is there's a word you can see on screen, and that word also exists in CEDIA. It's CEDIA's middle name. It's design. This is a document about design. It's not a document about measurement. It's not a document about setup. It's not a document about installation. And critically, it's not a calibration document. Everything we talk about in a design document, we think is predictable at the design and engineering stage. What we're not saying is this is a document to be used as a reference when you then go to calibrate and measure and verify the finished system. So when you read the document during the review, please read it through a lens of this is useful to me during the design phase of the project. And yes, a lot of the numbers will be very useful during measurement and calibration and verification. But the next recommended practice that we're going to go on to that we'll talk about a little bit later will cover that. And thirdly, this is audio. And of course, the whole experience in an entertainment space is both audio and video and HVAC and how comfortable the chairs are. It's really everything coming together. We are just talking about audio. So with that in mind, over to Ben.
Yeah, hey, it's interesting to look at that idea that this is just the audio paper. We started from the CEB 22, but as you said, was over a decade old. There'll be a video equivalent of this. There'll be an RP 23, so there is a video paper coming, and these are so much more in depth than what we had. This new paper is 5-6 times longer than the old CEB paper. This is a really, really deep dive into what is required to design an entertainment space. So when you add that to the future papers, to even things like RP28, the recommended practice for HDMI, we've got a complete set of documents either made or coming that really build a lot more detailed than we've ever had before. So it's quite an exciting time now that these are going to build together to allow us to actually communicate with clients in a way that we're all saying the same thing. We actually have a level. We've got something that is an agreed consensus that we can go out and say, this is what we're going to offer you. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited to get into it in a minute and show kind of a bit more of what is going to be in there.
I just want to quickly
go ahead.
mention something, and that is that Ben and I have used this phrase entertainment space design. The old recommended practice used home theatre, which I think is coming less, it's less being used these days. And what we've done in all these recommended practices is we're not talking about room use modes. So in other words, we're not talking about what the room is going to be used for. That's up to you as the integrator. That's up to you to have your discussion with your customer to decide all the different things that's going to be going on in that room. What we're talking about is raw levels of performance, regardless of the use mode. So we don't use phrases like home cinema or home theatre or media room. And personally, I have absolutely no idea what the difference between a media room and a home cinema is. And what we're really saying is if you have a multi-purpose space, which I guess is kind of traditionally thought of as a media room, there is absolutely no reason with some engineering and with a really great relationship with the customer and their design team, why you can't deliver a multi-purpose space to the absolute highest levels of performance. So that use mode is up to you in the integrator. We're not talking about theaters, cinemas, or media rooms.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. And again, it's not a total and complete guide for everything. It is quite complete, and it is what we believe we need to have as we launch this particular effort. As Peter mentioned, we will be doing revisions. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening in the world of audio. Some of the stuff isn't quite ready yet and needs more discussion, so there will be revisions of this. And if we tried to make it the total, complete, be-all, end-all guide of everything known to people and man, then it would be like 6,000 pages. And right now we're at 138 pages, which is plenty of pages filled with tons of information. So let's move on to why it was created. Peter did mention earlier that this was that we already had an existing document that needed to be updated. This document was created before immersive audio was a thing. It was being discussed, but it wasn't sound at the time. So we couldn't include it while we were doing that. Peter, I would like you to talk a little bit about one of the reasons why we focused on what we focused on with this document, and that you've already used the one D word, which is design, but the other word is creative intent. And then also, if you would speak a little bit about something brand new that we've introduced into this, which has also never been done before, which leads itself towards objective design systems versus subjective systems, which would be performance levels.
Sure, absolutely. In our working group, we have some people who work on the content creation side of things. So when I say content creation, I'm talking about people that work in the studios and do work for studios on the actual content that is then delivered to us and our customers in all the different forms. And we're really, really, really focused on this idea of creative intent. Now, when this content is created, when it's then mixed and when it's then mastered, the rooms that this happens in are pretty well set up to then allow those content creators to look at what's going on and to tell the story that they want to tell. And our vision, and I'll come on to levels in a second, is that we've defined 4 different levels of performance, with 1 being the lowest and 4 being the highest. And my analogy is you have a piece of artwork, and in front of that piece of artwork, there is some glass to protect it. And if the glass is really, really dirty, you might be able to see some hills and some houses and some grass, but you don't really know what that artist is trying to convey. If you clean that window, clean that glass to the point that, okay, yeah, I can see the scene. I can get a basic idea of what they're trying to convey. That's what we're calling level 1. Level 1 is a system with a performance that allows basic creative intent to be conveyed and reproduced. You clean the window a little bit more, you get to level 2. You clean the window even more till that glass is pretty crystal clear, and you get to level 3. And level 3 is equivalent to the old reference. You then remove the glass completely, so there's nothing between you and that artwork, and you get to level 4. And as we go from level 1 to level 4, the technical parameters, the technical requirements get tougher and tougher and tougher. And for just audio, for audio only, we're still working through video. For just audio, there are 20 separate technical parameters that we have defined objective metrics for. And those metrics are predictable during the design stage. Remember, this is a design document. And then we're going to go on to the measurement and verification document. Those metrics will be measurable and verifiable at that stage. And in all of our conversations talking about performance levels, we've been very, very, very focused on making sure that an increase in some kind of performance metric isn't just a number for the sake of it. It's not just, oh, that's a bigger number, that'll be great. It's a bigger number because it allows more of that creative intent to come through. As the numbers get better, we're cleaning that window, and we're putting less between our customers and the content that they're viewing. And this concept of performance levels that we're also going to have in video as well. And I suspect there's going to be as many or even more numbers when it comes to the video side. This is quite a radical difference from the old recommended practice. The old CEB 22 didn't have that many numbers in. It had the one that everyone seems to talk about, which is 105 dB for reference. But even 105 dB, well, I do know what that means, but actually I have no idea what that means. Is that long term? Is that short term? How is that measured? Using what kind of signal, with what methodology? So we've gone much, much deeper in defining all these different metrics for all the different levels of performance to come up with something that's very, very holistic and complete.
Yeah, thank you for that, Peter. Another parameter that I can bring to the table here as we're discussing this are some very practical things, like how far away is a seat from a wall? If your couch is, completely against the back wall, or your seat is, 12 inches away from a sidewall, that's going to skew the presentation. So while Peter did talk about more of a technical parameter, we also have practical parameters in these too, to try to keep people from, or designers from, doing things like putting a seat directly against a surface. That's not going to be a great presentation in a balanced immersive audio system. And I also bring up that level 1 is likely the most controversial level, because we're saying that if you don't meet level 1, that we don't believe that it meets the basic artistic intent. But this is also a document to be used by everyone at all levels. Yes, you can use an AVR and bookshelf speakers, but if you try to put that in a gigantic room, it's not going to work. But if you put that in the right size room with the right kind of design, it'll be just fine. So I wanted to make sure that this isn't perceived as an elitist and a document that is difficult and only for the top 2% of jobs. It's just about design and about any level of job. So Ben, go ahead.
Can I just add one thing about levels that I think might clarify it? What we're recommending is that if you have an entertainment space and it, let's say, has 12 seating positions, that you work out the level performance for each of those seating positions, and they're going to be different. At that money seat, at the reference seating position, that's where you're probably going to have the best performance in the room. And then as you go out from there, as you get further away from that point, the level of performance it probably will decrease as you go outwards to those seats. And what we're saying is every seat has a level attached to it. And that means that you can have an informed discussion with your customer. And the level of the whole room, so you can say, this is a level 3 room or whatever level, is the level apportioned to the reference seating position and at least one adjacent seat to that position. Because we acknowledge that the majority of rooms are going to have some seats that are going to give the most uncompromised performance. But then you might have a bar at the back of the room, which is a great social seating area for watching sports, but no one's pretending that you're going to get absolute top reference level performance there. So we have been pragmatic. Level 1 is very, very achievable. The levels are not a budget conversation, although needless to say, as the room gets bigger, it's going to cost more money to get the brightness of image with 2-piece projection and the sound pressure level that you require in those spaces. They really are purely engineering focused, and with really, really, really good engineering, you should be able to achieve the higher levels for not that much money in smaller rooms.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Peter. Ben, I'd like to throw it over to you just to explain. I just wanted to make sure we spent enough time on this levels business. But from a sales perspective, Ben, I'd like you to also address why levels are a good thing. So we have a performance side, but we also have a sales side.
Yeah, sure. And a lot of my sound bites here have just been covered. So I probably could pop off for lunch at this point. But the sales point's really interesting because when we're building an entertainment space, that is about delivering a shared experience. And it's really not that difficult to build like a cinema or a media room for someone that delivers at one position. That's, most people doing this DIY themselves can get a pretty good performance at one position. And this having levels done by seat means that we're actually being able to define the shared experience so that we know that everybody is going to get a great experience, that artistic intent is being delivered across your whole seating area. So once we've got a subjective standard, and level 1 is going to be interesting because we've now got subjective levels. If 2 or 3 companies are speaking to a client and one of them's done a lot of discovery, they understand exactly what the client wants, they've done the design, they've got a specified engineered system, we've all been in situations where another integrator or a fringe trade who doesn't really know what they're doing comes along and says, hey, I can build you a cinema, it will be X amount of money, which is maybe 20, 30, 40% of what the really engineered solution costs. Well, sure, I can build a cinema for small figure. It's not going to deliver the artistic intent. So we now actually have a position where if multiple people are pitching a system or a design, the client will have an understanding of what they are being offered. That if somebody is offering a level 3 system and the middle row of seats will deliver level 3, we're going to have, we think we can achieve level 2 in the row behind, but we can do a heat map. We can show the client, this is where we think you will get this performance in these seats. This is what we are going to deliver. That's what we're designing to. So if you now have 2 wildly different priced proposals in front of you, you understand what they both deliver. And there will be a lot of people that have used the word reference in the past that it was loud, right? Great, brilliant. It was loud. But there will be some some pushback, I'm sure, from industry. I reckon I could go on Instagram right now and type in reference, and most of the rooms that would come up won't meet our level 1 criteria. So loud isn't going to be enough. You hang a projector over people's heads, it's noisy, right? You've just destroyed the atmosphere. If you put people right against the back wall and they've got surround backs like earphones, well, we're going to localize those sounds. That's going to completely cripple the sound field. That's not going to meet level 1. So this isn't necessarily about spending more money, about doing bigger and better. It's about being smart, about proper considered design, so that we make the most of the client's money by getting the best from that equipment. If we use it properly, you don't have to spend so much money because you'll get a better performance from it.
Can I quickly answer a question that's popped up? Owen has said, I worry that people who are half engaged will just say, yeah, ours is level 3 without evidence, and it isn't. How do we fix that? I think really we do that in 2 ways. Number one, we all need to get together as a community and start talking about levels. We need to educate our customers. We need to educate our suppliers. We need to ingrain the concept of levels into the industry. And second, if I say this system is going to cost £60,000, euros, dollars, and it's going to be a level 1 or a level 2 system, and a competitor comes along and says, I'll do that for half the price, well, then the question that we need to get the client to ask is, when you say that, what exactly do you mean? And show me the numbers. Show me that you have done the engineering calculations to predict, and because that's what this document is all about. Walt is going to smile when I now do my favorite quote, but in a podcast a few years ago, Walt interviewed a lady called Poppy Crum, and Poppy at the time had the most fantastic job title, and that was Chief Scientist at Dolby. She's now moved on. But during that podcast, Poppy said just the most wonderful quote that I use all the time, and I don't apologize for it. And that is, standards ensure consistency of experience. And I just thought that was beautiful. And what we're trying to do here is predict the level of performance in a room. Not it's expensive, therefore it's good. Not, oh, I've been doing this 30 years, therefore it's good. Not, oh, I'm mates with that bloke at that speaker company and his speakers are the best, therefore this is good. But actual engineering prediction. So, my answer to Owen is we need to show people the numbers. We need to show our customers the engineering. And as and when, so I suspect it'll be sometime next year, we publish the next recommended practice, which is going to be the measurement and verification one, then that will then close the loop. I've promised you this level of performance. I've measured and verified it according to recommended practices and approved methodology. And here are the results to show that I promised you this, I've delivered you this. Happy days.
Yeah. And it's our responsibility as an industry to deliver something tangible and something that is based on objective results. And that's all we're doing here. So I think it's a great thing for the industry. Let's
one thing
Go
just
ahead,
to
Ben.
note there before we move on is that predictability does absolutely require that we have engineering data. Having worked through this process over the last few years and seeing this come together, I now vote with my client's money. My client's money goes to manufacturers who provide me the right engineering data because it's predictable and I can actually engineer with it. So it is something that we know manufacturers will have to follow, that it's impossible to predict what performance we will deliver if we don't get proper data. So there will be, it's another RP coming. We will have RP1 will be a criteria that tells manufacturers what info we need. But right now, some are better than others. There are definitely some manufacturers who are brilliant. They give us everything. And others who it's a bit smoke and mirrors. And it's difficult. It's difficult to predict if you're using a manufacturer that, you like and they give you good profit margins, you like the sales guy. You can't promise the client what that will achieve at all.
Yeah. The last
Couple of
comment.
questions.
Well, let me just pop something in here fast, and then we can go to some more questions regarding the measurement recommended practice. people measure now, and you don't need to do anything special. But what we decided to do was do a recommended practice on how to measure for those that don't know how to measure or don't use somebody that does measurement. So it's not like you can't verify any of these things that we're having you do. We just decided it would also be a good idea to have a recommended practice specifically that ties into to the immersive audio design recommended practice, just as a companion document to make a holistic offering. Peter, did you want to address a question or two?
Yeah, a couple of questions. One from
Okay.
Thomas, very good question. He says, how do we address the seating against the back wall situation if there's no other option? I believe from memory that from level 1, we require the listener's head to be half a meter, which as I was told in the US, they're called freedom units. In freedom units, that is around 1.5 feet from a room boundary. So I don't think that's too draconian. And if you have to put your customer's head closer than half a meter away from a room boundary, I don't think any of us can say that you're going to get an acceptable result. If that's the only row of seating in the room, then yeah, you're not going to hit a level. If that's just the back row, but there's a row in front of it that's a lot further away, then that back row might not even hit level 1, but you might find that that front row could hit level 3. And quickly to answer Torsten's query, what we're suggesting with the performance levels isn't how to do it; it's what you need to achieve. So, as an example, we're suggesting that the frequency response below the room's transition frequency should conform to whatever you want as a target curve. And that if you've nailed that at the reference seating position, we're suggesting that other seats around it should have a fairly equal experience to that reference seating position. I don't think that's a particularly contentious statement to say you want even bass response from seat to seat. Now, how you achieve that, we have some recommendations on how to achieve it, some simple recommendations. But if you decide, well, actually, I've got a better way to achieve that, we don't mind. Those numbers are there to say as long as you've done something engineering to deliver that result, hey, we've got some suggestions. But if you think you've got a better way, knock your socks off.
Okay. Great questions. Thanks everybody for posting these questions. It helps all of us, and we love the questions. So just quickly, I wanted to talk about, okay, so you've got this thing. So who's been involved in the creation of this thing? And I'm going to hand it over to Peter and to Ben to talk about some of the volunteers. So I give you guys some more time.
We like to have a very broad church when we're doing standards, and we don't like standards work groups to be dominated by any one particular kind of participant.
And we need
I know that
balance
we
per our
absolutely have
ANSI.
to have balance. We know in the past that the whole CEDIA recommended practice and standards effort has been criticized because it's been loaded with manufacturers. And people have said, oh, well, the manufacturers are just trying to push their own agenda. I think my first answer to that is that the chairs of the working groups, I chair RP22. We have Anthony Gramani chairing RP1, which is performance facts. And we have Joel Silver and Jason Dustle jointly chairing RP23. We're really, really good at making sure that, that there aren't any agendas, and that the discussion is very, very consensus led. But we have manufacturers, we have integrators, we have consultants, we have sales reps, we have distributors, we have content creators. And one very, very interesting category of person that I really appreciate what they bring to the table is we now have some people whose job is a professional calibrator. And the great thing about having professional calibrators present is these people see 100 or more rooms a year. So when we're talking about numbers, when we're thinking, well, can this be achieved? They've got the data that we can use to have a really, really informed discussion around what can or can't be achieved. So it's a very broad set of people with a broad set of opinions and a broad set of contexts. And the other thing to mention, and again, this is my second sales pitch for please get involved in standards, is we don't require people to have 20 or 30 years worth of experience. So long as you have an engineering-led mindset and you're willing to participate in a consensus-based discussion, we would love to have you. And actually, we really enjoy having people that are at the less experienced end of things, because they keep us real. Quite often, those of us that have been doing this a long time and deal with very, very high-end systems, we talk about stuff that these newer people just say to us, look, come on, let's hold this back a bit. And we have it's not really a rule, but it's something I say a lot during standards calls, that these papers are not for the 3%, they're for the 97%. I think it was Torsten said earlier, if someone's a really good acoustic designer, then maybe they've got a different method to do things. Fantastic. But that 97% of the industry probably don't have that knowledge, experience, and competence. So we always look at creating these through the lens of someone who can read it that isn't experienced, someone that can read it and read around the subject and get a huge amount of benefit from it. So it's not just for the top 2 or 3% of integrators in the world. It really is for everybody.
Yeah. Ben, you want to talk
Yeah,
about
hey,
our meeting?
Just on that last point, that's been really interesting while we've been teaching workshops on some of this content. It's been interesting to see integrators who come into a room one of two ways. Either they're ready to learn, they know they need to learn, they're excited to see what's in it, or they think they already know everything they're going to be taught and they're there to kind of humor us. And within the first 10-15 minutes, they realize that there's a lot, it's a whole big world and there's a lot of stuff they actually had never even considered. So sure, the top 3-5% of integrators are probably already doing everything in this paper, and that's great. That's brilliant. But this gives the ability for newer firms, for younger junior designers to actually understand what's required. What does it take to make a reference room? Now there's a checklist. You've got the criteria, and there will be things on there that people have never considered, right? So that gives them. I think this is almost a springboard to go out and do the reading. You're going to go into those normative references and to all the stuff we've given. This is 136 pages of starting point. And that comes from the fact that everybody learned, while we were writing it, the content creators are getting a better understanding of what happens in residential rooms. There are definitely conversations that were had that they're only really considering at times large theatrical scale presentation. And we're like, well, that doesn't exist in my client's small room in central London, that, huge land value, small room. So actually, we've all kind of learned from each other through that process, and it's now time for the 97% to come along and get that knowledge.
Can I quickly address a question from Peter, who asks, okay, but not spreadsheet-based calculations, finite and boundary element methods, please. You are free to use whatever methods of calculations and predictions you like. What we're saying is this is what we think the end result should be. How you choose to justify and predict that is completely up to you. And we've had long discussions around the acoustics of spaces. And the reality of having acoustics discussions is that if you have 10 acousticians in a room talking about what to do, you're probably going to end up with 13 different answers. It is an area where there are certain things that is pretty much agreed in consensus. There are other things where different people have different opinions over how that can be achieved. So as far as the acoustics of a room is concerned, we've provided some pretty solid basic recommendations. We've provided a number of performance level criteria, such as seat-to-seat consistency for bass, where room acoustics are going to have a big effect on that. And, I think 2023 is going to be a really, really important year for that, because it's going to be the year of active acoustics. So I think we're probably going to have to come back to the table in 18 months and maybe update the paper with the realities of what active acoustics means. But yeah, you are free to use whatever kind of predictive analytics, whatever kind of modeling you like to then justify your design choices.
Yeah. And again, the most exciting part is this is done with practical working knowledge among all the different trades and disciplines that we have involved. So it's an exciting document. So let's get on to the peer review. And before I do that, pitch number 3, because Peter's done this twice. Again, if you want to get involved and be part of the standards, all you need to be is a CTA or a CEDIA member, and you can get involved. And I guarantee you, it will end up being professional development. It's also networking. You get to meet a lot of people you would have never met, or talk to people you might not have ever been able to talk to. It's just great camaraderie as we develop these things with real regular people just like you. So again,
It's definitely not volunteering. Let's lose the word volunteering.
right.
It's free education. You're going to learn everything for free. That's the number one selling point.
Thank you for
And
that, Ben.
The other thing to say about CEDIA standards is I think we're a lot more fun than most other standards groups. I've been on, I'm not going to mention any association names, you know who they are. I've been on standards calls where they've had 3 weeks discussions on what font to use for something. We're not like that. Where, you know, our calls are fun, they're engaging, we have a laugh. There's some banter involved. We get to know each other and treat each other like people. They really are fantastic environments in which to have just a completely fear-free space for you to say what you feel. And if someone says something and, you know, others agree with it, disagree with it rather, the chairs are there to moderate that discussion. And when 2 people disagree, it's actually wonderful, because the whole group ends up talking about it, and where we end up is usually somewhere in the middle. So, you know, please don't feel that these are very, very intense, hardcore, intimidating environments. They're really not.
Yeah, and just to put another fine point on this before we move on, we end up with many people that call in from job sites and never miss, because they get that much value out of it. They call in from cars, they call in from job sites, they call in from their office, they call in from wherever. So it's actually pretty fun. All right, peer review. So when, how, and how long? You see a note down there. Yes, you need to be a CEDIA or a CTA member to participate in the peer review, but that's it. Right now, we are doing an internal sanity check to make sure that we don't have grave errors, punctuation errors, redundancies, all that type of stuff that the work group is doing right now. We actually start review of those comments tomorrow, and we hope to wrap that up in 2 weeks, incorporate any changes that need to be changed into the document so we can have a final peer review document ready. Then, if you're interested, starting now, you can email at standards@cedia.org, which thank you, Jessica, for popping that banner up there, and say, look, I'm interested in getting in on the review. And that's all you need to do. You'll be part of the list. You'll receive a link. It's very easy. I'm going to switch to the next slide. We are doing Adobe. We're using Adobe to do this, and it's worked out really great. We were the guinea pigs for it. We tried it internally, and it's worked beautifully. So it's very easy to do. You'll get a link. It'll bring you to this document. The first page is directions on how to enter as a guest, enter your name. There's some very simple rules. You'll notice that each page has numbers on it from 1 to 31. No use in doing sequential numbering, because we didn't want you to have to say, yeah, on page 16, oh, sorry, I shouldn't say 16. On page 132, line number 6,335, I have a comment. This way, it already captures every page that you're on when you make your comment automatically. And then you just say, hey, line 14, I have a comment about line 14. So there are some rules on how you comment, but it's that easy. So if you're a CEDIA or CTA member and you wish to take a look at this document, and then you also wish to comment on it, we welcome it. So that'll be, again, we'll be sending out information on that in about 2 weeks. So just email CEDIA or standards@cedia.org with your interest. That's all we have for you today. Peter or Ben, is there any last comments you wanted to make before we end our session?
Just a quick comment about the review process. As a working group, we are obliged to read and consider every single comment that is put down. When we're not obliged to agree with it, we're not obliged to integrate it, but we will treat every single comment like it was a comment coming from someone within the working group. It will be discussed. There may or may not be a consensus reached. If there's not a total consensus reached, then that will go to a vote within the working group. But please know that if you do make a comment, it absolutely will be considered. Also, please note, if you do make a comment, don't expect it to be integrated into the document. And if we decide not to integrate your comment, then I'm very, very happy to have a conversation around what the group decided and why we didn't do that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Peter. I was remiss in mentioning how we will address comments. So thank you for picking up that ball I just dropped. Ben, any last words?
We've just had a question coming, Walt, about the time frame for the peer review. So
Yeah,
that's
2 weeks.
2-week window.
2 weeks, and there's
So
a
this
reason
isn't
why
a
it's
long period.
Yeah.
I'll let you go.
there's a reason why it's 2 weeks. If you're interested, you're going to take a look at the document and you're going to comment. And if you're not interested, we don't want to keep a document out there for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And we've also done only 2 weeks for our own internal review. So when it goes live, there'll be 2 weeks to get your comments in, and then we will close the ability to do the comments. That's a great question.
So to answer the question in terms of actual timescales, we now have probably another 2 weeks just to run through things internally and make any small changes that we decide internally within Workgroup 1. Then after a little bit of final formatting, I suspect that within between two or 3 weeks time, that 2-week review period will start. Once that review period closes, the amount of time it will take us to review all the comments completely depends on how many comments there are.
Yes.
And what I suspect will happen is that we will probably get comment clusters. And that means there will be certain things that we've written that we will get a lot of comments on. There will be certain things we've written that we really aren't going to get much at all. So the length of time it will then take between the review period being closed and the document being revised and finally published will completely depend on how long it takes Working Group 1 to consider, discuss, and reach consensus on every single comment that's been made.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly as Peter just said it. So thank you, everyone. I know we've kept you for 47 minutes, but we had a lot to say, and we wanted to make sure you truly understood before we opened up the peer review what this thing was, how it came about, and how you can get involved. So again, you can just email standards@cedia.org if you would like to get involved in standards or if you would like to be a part of the review. Thank you very much for your time today. Peter and Ben, thank you very much for assisting today.
Thank you, Walt. And I'd like to say a big public thank you to both Walt, who is our staff liaison. He manages every call exceptionally. You know, what you see will be as much down to Walt. And another person I'd like to give a big public call out to, who is David Mayer. David is from Australia, lives and works there, and he is the CEDIA staff member responsible for taking our almost unreadable scrawl and kind of incomprehensible, confused working document and turning that into the beautifully formatted, really wonderfully copy edited thing that you're going to see. So really big shout out to David, who's been a massive part of this process.
Yeah, thank you for that, Peter. Everybody have a great day. I hope to hear from all of you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.